So behind me is one of the most successful stories and the most inspirational stories in Africa. And that story is Ethiopian Airways. I'm sitting at Bole International Airport. It's owned by Ethiopian Airways, and Ethiopian Airways is owned by the government of Ethiopia, and it is funded by the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Ethiopia. Now, you need to understand that Ethiopia has never been colonized by white people. So this airline was created by black people, a black government in 1945, and it was grown from nothing to become the biggest airliner on the African continent. It has revenues of 7.2 billion US dollars and a profit of 800 million US dollars. They've got 149 aircraft. They own Malawi Airlines, Zambian Airlines, and a number of other airlines on the African continent. But just 15 years ago, this airline was not the biggest on the African continent. South African Airways was the biggest on the continent. And South African Airways was being managed by white people like Coleman Andrews from the United States of America. And that man destroyed South African Airways from being the biggest airliner on the African continent to having 12 aircraft, 80 million US dollars revenue, and a loss of 200 million US dollars in the last financial year. The financing model for South African Airways is it's owned by the government of South Africa, which is funded by white monopoly capital because South Africa does not have a sovereign wealth fund. So part and parcel of why South African Airlines was destroyed is because a white man called Coleman Andrews from the United States of America came in, sold South African Airways fleet, began to lease aircraft from America, and he pocketed a lot of money in kickbacks from that corruption. South Africa does not have a sovereign wealth fund, so it does not finance its own activities. It relies on white monopoly capital to borrow money so that it can keep its parastatals going. Ethiopia, on the other hand, finances its parastatals, finances its SOEs with the sovereign wealth of its own citizens. This is the difference. South Africa is being looted by white monopoly capital, white finance, white banks that then lend the government of South Africa exorbitantly at high interest rates. And when they choose, like what Future Growth decided to do together with other finances, they just decide not to lend the government so that SOEs like Eskom, SAA, PRASA, Transnet can fail. The Ethiopians are using a totally different model because they've never been colonized. They do not have financial institutions from white countries or Western countries. They've only got local banks in this country and its sovereign wealth fund. They're able to finance their parastatals and their airliner to become the best in Africa. Managed by black people into being the biggest on the African continent, this shows you that we don't need white people in Africa to do things for us. They've also done the same with electricity. They didn't have an electricity grid just 30 years ago, while South Africa had a surplus of electricity. But now Ethiopia is a net exporter of electricity, and they've never had load shedding since they began to develop their grid. Inga Dam is going to come into full capacity, and they'll have more than enough electricity than they need. Again, done by black people, while South Africa, run by white monopoly capital, is failing. Black excellence always beats white people in Africa and elsewhere. The Swiss do not have a national airliner, or at least it failed a number of times. Together with a number of other European countries, Ethiopian Airlines has been going, it's profitable, it's a going concern. Learn something from this, South Africa. Now you're giving your spazas to Pick and Pay, you're giving your spazas over to ShopRite. White people cannot manage your country better than yourselves because their only objective is to destroy, monopolize, and kill. It is to control black people. It is to destroy what black people build. It's to show that black people don't know what they're doing. But I'm showing you an example that shows you that black people do better than white people. This is an example. A country that's never been colonized, but a country that was also isolated by colonialism of other African countries. But within 60 years, they're doing better than many European airlines. They're doing better than many European countries that are 200, 300 years old. Learn from this. Learn from this, Africa, and stop sleeping.